Wrench in the Cypher's plans. You can view the escort unit's predicted route on your map. The target should link up with them somewhere along it.
Extraction arrived at Mother Base.
Mission complete, and how? They're gonna tell stories about this one, boss. Boss, we searched the truck you recovered. There were two primary types of cargo. First, drums of malachite, a copper ore. That took up most of the truck bed. But malachite isn't valuable enough to warrant an escort. The real cargo was likely the second item, a shielding container. The contents, yellow cake. That's right, the raw material for a nuclear weapon. That might point to the weapon to surpass Metal Gear Emmerich told us about. But who can say? Thing is, there isn't a lot of it. Not enough to make a nuclear warhead. Give us some time. We'll look into it. Try to figure out why they had this under such close guard.
Please select a mission. Mission accepted. Heading to Afghanistan. Deploying.
Boss, retrieve the film canister our informant hid in Spookmate Keep before he died. It contains vital information on Skullface's plan. For now, our only clue is the garbled photograph the informant tried to send us before the end. We're working on analyzing the data, but there's no time to wait. A KGB Spetsnaz squad is after the target as well. Boss, go to Spookmate Keep and use the VI to lead you to where the film canister is hidden. It is paramount you retrieve the target before the enemy does.
Be careful down there, boss.
Map has been updated. Analysis complete. You have arrived at your destination. Analysis complete. Analysis complete. An enemy presence detected. The map has been updated. Analysis complete.
Go clear! Go
coming too. Roger that.
Капель, Дмитрий 2. Одного из наших унесло на воздушный шар. Кажется, у нас лазутчик. Не заняться его поисками? Прием! Это КП, понял. Проверить окрестности. Избавиться от чужака. Конец связи.
You gonna extract him? Subject on board. Leave the rest to us. You've completed your objective. Now get out of the hot zone.
Mission info has been
Капель,
updated.
Дмитрий 2. Незаконченный поиск. Никто не обнаружен. Прием! Это КП, понял. Оставайтесь на чеку. Конец связи.
He's coming too.
Капель, Дмитрий 2. Расстреляли, но вызванным не было слышно. Возможно, противник использует уроки с глушителем. Прием! Это КП, понял. Внимание всем
You
постам.
gonna extract him?
Где-то прячется. Найти их. Конец связи.
He's coming too. Roger that.
КП 9. Одного из наших унесло на воздушном шаре. Похоже, у нас на базе противник. Жду указаний. Прием. Это КП, понял. Последующие потери неприемлемы. Держите ухо восток. Конец связи.
You gonna extract him? Subject on board. Leave the rest to us. He's coming too. Roger that.
КП 9. Незаконченный поиск. Никто не обнаружен. Прием. Это КП, понял. Не расслабляйтесь. Они еще могут быть рядом. Конец связи.
Subject on board. Leave the rest to us.
Please select a landing support
Roger.
helicopter requested. Extraction arrived at main base. Enemy presence detected. Map has been updated.
This is B-Quad. Arriving shortly at LZ. This is B-Quad. Have arrived at LZ. Will stand by.
complete, boss.
Side ops list updated.
Boss, I've updated the mission list.
Mission list updated.
We received a new job offer. The details are on your iDroid.
We finished decoding the informant's report. That floating kid we've run into a few times now. Looks like he was a test subject in clinical experiments. The Soviets called him the Third Boy. The Third Boy was brought to a lab on the outskirts of Moscow from Czechoslovakia, after which he was due to be sent to a research center in Leningrad, then Siberia, and finally an academic town in Novosibirsk. It doesn't appear that the researchers witnessed the talents we've seen from him, but nevertheless he was quite the popular subject. His latent cognitive abilities suddenly awoke en route to Moscow. According to the report, the Third Boy was easily influenced by other individuals' biofields. Evil thoughts, in particular. They affected his mind like a virus. Extreme anger or resentment, motives for revenge, in other words. Now, during the transport flight to Moscow, the boy was exposed to a powerful mental energy field coming from a certain individual. Ever since, being conscious of his powers, he's become a sort of energy generator. What's unique about him is the way his acute telepathic abilities get taken over by another person's will. The boy began to physically parasitize individuals experiencing extreme anger and codify the host's desires. This includes amplifying the host's natural strengths. Or, in accordance with the host's desires, he can also implant program code in another individual, making them a puppet, essentially. Human neural synapses transmit weak electrical currents between neurons. These electrical currents, though at a level difficult to observe, warp the magnetic field outside the body. The Third Boy is able to pick up these weak fluctuations. Contrary to psychotronics, which involves controlling the human mind, his abilities as a receptor are too high. The emotions he picks up from another individual are amplified and unleashed into his body as they recur in his brain. They turn into microwaves, which then affect the physical world, triggering paranormal phenomena like the spontaneous combustion of organic matter or psychokinesis, moving an object without touching it. There's one other thing. While he's parasitizing a host, the boy's ego gets shut away, allowing the will of the host to take control of his powers, like some annoying static drowning out your own voice. That means he isn't responsible for what's been happening. Somebody's extreme anger has manifested through the Third Boy's powers in ways none of us could have predicted, which would mean this was going on somewhere around us. Looking back on it, a lot of things make sense now. The man on fire, Sahelanthropus, they both came to life thanks to the Third Boy's powers. Everything has been happening through him as a catalyst. We first saw him in the hospital on Cyprus. The boy parasitizing the man on fire's desire for revenge gave him his new abilities in return. He next appeared at the Hamid Fighters Fort where the honeybee was hidden. There, the boy parasitized Skullface's vengeful mind. He controlled Sahelanthropus, making it do whatever Skullface wanted. Same goes for when we extracted Emmerich onto the chopper. When he appeared at the Devil's House in Central Africa, Skullface's will controlled the man on fire via the Third Boy's powers. Everything is clear up to this point. But even the informant couldn't pinpoint who the host was in the cave within Serac power plant. Sahelanthropus suddenly became active, then crushed not only the man on fire, but Skullface as well. Surely neither of them could have been the host. Who else was at that location and bore anger more extreme than either of them? Whose will was controlling Sahelanthropus? According to the report, emotions transmitted in children's brains affect the surrounding magnetic field more strongly. Cerebral nerves are covered with insulation called myelin sheaths to increase impulse speed. The reason for this leakage has to do with the fact that children's myelin sheaths are still developing. So, how many children do you remember being there? Children with a burning desire for revenge and bearing a grudge against you. I can think of only one. Eli. We don't know what kind of life he's had, but the resentment he's shown toward adults is nothing short of extraordinary. The third boy resonated with Eli's mind. And that means Eli bore the strongest animosity of all individuals within the boy's reception range, estimated to be a 3-mile radius, beating out even Volgan and Skullface. The third boy has probably remained hooked on Eli's anger since. You remember at the Devil's House, the third boy showed an interest in Shabani? That must have been his ego making a rare appearance. He may possess abilities far beyond anyone else in the world, but he's still a kid. Maybe them both being kids was enough to bring them together. And if so, maybe with Eli, he isn't feeding off him, but acting in symbiosis with him. So what kick-started the third boy's powers? If we look at the location and time that his plane went down, we can make a pretty good guess. When the plane experienced the first anomaly, it gave an accurate report of its position to a control tower, due north of the Black Sea, 125 miles east of Kiev. Dead south on the Black Sea is Cyprus's Green Line, so the plane's position was directly north of the hospital where you'd been asleep for 9 years. And this anomaly was reported at exactly the same time that you woke up. The plane was enveloped in flame from the inside out. The fuselage burnt to ashes. There were no survivors, at least not publicly admitted. Your thoughts formed a synchronicity with the boy's psyche and were amplified inside his brain. That would have been more than enough to trigger his abilities. Your rage was like a big bang in his head, blowing the lid off his powers. The boy was then secretly moved to the lab outside of Moscow where Volgan was comatose. There, Volgan's thoughts resonated with the boy and he was awakened. Volgan became the man on fire, hell-bent on getting revenge on you. His instincts led him straight to you. Skullface knew Volgan from Operation Snake Eater, or perhaps from even before. Monitoring this pair of extraordinaries, he discovered the hospital and sent his assassin and XOF. Skullface was probably watching the situation from close by. Then, realizing how useful these two test subjects could be, he approached them. Reacting to Skullface's thirst for revenge, this time the boy let Skullface's will control Volgan. Volgan, at times driven by personal revenge, at times through Skullface's will, kept on moving, though his body was little more than dead meat. Perhaps there were moments where even your thoughts affected him as well. But without the boy's power, it was like the plug had been pulled from the socket. Everything was powered by anger, malice, revenge. This is how the end of the report sums things up. Both the third boy and the man on fire were originally test subjects of paranormal research for military applications, like telekinetically controlling the leader of an enemy nation and making him launch a nuke, or stopping the heart of someone on the wrong side of the Berlin Wall, experimenting with latent human abilities. They were used as tools of the Cold War. The boy's only crime was being born with unique gifts. But he was sacrificed on the altar of war. His life reduced to slavery under other people's wills. Turned into a living weapon with no will of his own. And eventually the only emotion he could feel must have been the desire to get revenge for the hand he'd been dealt. Boss, it's you that awakened the boy's powers. But there's more to it than that. I guess the anger emanating from you was something he could truly relate to.
hope you bought a better hamburger this time, Kazuhira.
Right. Well,
The last one was lacking in every way. The patty was too thin, the bun too dry, and the lettuce days old at best.
hey, that was 100% all beef patty, and no shortening in the bun either.
Nature's blessings, unadulterated, in hamburger form. Is that it? But when taste falls short, so does our gratitude to nature. Making such precious blessings unpalatable is sacrilege.
I hate to admit it, but I think you're right. I should have known better than to settle for second best. That's why I had him run some more R&D, develop a new burger. In fact, one of our researchers just dropped by with the latest results. Here it is. See how you like this?
We shall see indeed. I thank you for this bounty, Mother Earth.
So, what's the verdict?
Not bad.
And?
But it does not hold a candle to what I ate back home.
Everyone's a critic. Damn it. I was sure the Kobe beef, but maybe we didn't add enough. If we add any more, we're cutting into our profits.
Profits?
We'll be taking a loss on every unit.
What are you talking about?
Huh? Oh, anyway, I'll be back with another round of product.
I will be waiting. Did you say product?
Feeling hungry, old timer?
Old timer. I do not get hungry, no. But you have a new hamburger?
You guessed it. And this time we use lamb.
Lamb?
You're not a lamb kind of guy?
A hamburger is made of beef. Who ever heard of a hamburger without beef?
Yeah, but we gotta stay fresh, stand out from our competition.
You're what?
Just give it a try.
If you say so. Not bad. But I cannot call this a hamburger.
I thought we were onto something this time. Maybe the problem is that it looks like a regular hamburger. Gotta think outside the box. Too much baggage if they come in expecting just another burger. Let's see, cotton candy? To make it look like a sheep? Yeah.
Just a minute. You really think people would eat that? What is it you are planning? Are you using me? A taste tester? A one-man focus group?
Well, actually, I've already started. I got a place called, Miller's Maxi Buns.
You are kidding me.
Well, to be honest, business hasn't been great. No one seems to like my, buns.
The Ocelot said Diamond Dog's budget did not add up. But you don't mean to tell me.
What? No. Our black budget's got it all covered. I'm not embezzling GMP or anything. Still, let's not say anything to Snake, okay?
Very well. However, Kazuhira, it takes more than premium ingredients and a clever recipe to satisfy the palate.
Okay, so what do we do?
The palate seeks one thing: chemical additives.
Chemical additives.
There is nothing mysterious or spiritual about good flavor. The tongue simply identifies specific amino acids which the brain then recognizes as appealing. Therefore, all that is needed is to chemically isolate those amino acids and incorporate them into your products. To be clear, I speak of flavor. The rest is irrelevant.
That seems a little extreme.
Do not forget that I am a scientist after all. And using science for the benefit of others is a joy. In seeking coexistence with nature's blessings, not everything can remain in its natural form. When we fall ill, we must be treated. Otherwise, that very nature could cost us our lives. Agriculture is one of nature's many blessings. But through that process, we damage the surrounding vegetation.
Yeah. Whether it's a massive farm or a tiny field, we always leave our mark on the land.
The same is true of parasites. And for food preparation. If tapeworms in the raw meat of another animal enter the human body, they roam around trying to find their usual habitat. Sometimes even eating away at the brain in their confusion. So in looking through a scientific point of view, you see the necessity for processing food. Yes, it is also sometimes necessary to eliminate certain parasites, or selectively use or even modify others. Alternatively, we could say that if a man is part of nature, the work he does is also part of it. What is important is the balance.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks, old-timer. You really opened my eyes. I fooled myself into thinking people today wanted high-quality, all-natural goods. But my favorite burgers were never about that. What they want is something like the first burger I had in America when I went to meet my dad. A Frankenburger loaded with additives. That's the America I knew and loved. I'll be back in a jiffy, old-timer. My next burger's gonna knock your socks off.
Kazuhira, wait. What is important is how we balance the... quick for a one-legged man. Frankenburger. What kind of a dive did your old man take you to?
Volgan, the GRU colonel, was burned alive with a Shagohod during Operation Snake Eater 20 years ago. Despite suffering severe burns to his entire body, he still clung to life. After you left Seleniarsk, Volgan's body was taken to a research institute in the outskirts of Moscow. But modern medicine couldn't explain why he was still alive. Not that the colonel was any ordinary man to begin with. That constant electric current he had running through his body that he could unleash at will. To be honest, I was always uncomfortable around him. Thought I might get electrocuted just by standing nearby. The institute studying him was tasked with investigating and developing human paranormal abilities. The comatose Volgan was used to further the Soviet Union's research into such abilities. But not long ago, the facility burned to the ground. And Volgan's body was never found among the rubble, even though the fire started in the room where they were keeping him. This occurred at around the same time you woke up. If Skullface was right, and a thirst for revenge can turn a man into a demon and keep the dead alive, then this man on fire who's been coming after us ever since you woke up, well, that just might be what's left of our old friend Volgan. It's not over yet. Back in '64, in Seleniarsk, you brought his plans for a utopia down in flames. That grudge is what's keeping him alive. The day the research facility holding Volgan burned down, a Soviet jumbo passenger jet happened to crash nearby, far away to the north of that hospital in Cyprus. On board the plane was a young boy who was being studied at the same facility. The plane fell to Earth from over 8,000 feet, but the boy's body was the only one not recovered. At almost exactly the same time as the crash, Vulcan awoke in that facility. According to the Research Institute's documents, the gifts this boy demonstrated included psychokinesis and telepathy. To protect his mind from being inundated with other people's thoughts, he always wore a kind of gas mask. A rudimentary form of psychic insulation, apparently. We don't know where this boy is, but if Skullface is connected to him, we may cross paths with him yet. This boy is part of a new age where nothing we understand about the world makes sense anymore. Don't let your guard down. So what were they doing at Nzoya Badia, Baloo? That facility with all the people laid out in rows?
The abandoned factory Shabani was held in.
It is precisely as you guessed. Black Anna was coding languages into the vocal cord parasites. They infected the subjects with the parasites, then made an incision in the throat to expose the vocal cords. That allowed them to play recordings of a desired language directly to the parasites.
And the parasites learn the languages that way. That's some teaching method. I just don't get how a bunch of bugs had the brain power for it.
They don't. Do not judge them by human standards. They do not learn as a function of intellect.
Then how do they do it?
What language the parasites react to is coded into their genes. You could expose the Japanese strain to English for years, and it would never learn the language and react to it. The pronunciation, rhythm, and structure are different. But what about, say, Spanish and Portuguese? Linguistically, the two are very close.
Yeah, they're both Ibero-Romance languages.
Even so, a Spanish language mating pair exposed to Portuguese will not copulate. Only when they hear Spanish. Only then. And the majority of their offspring will be the same.
So it's a literal case of a mother tongue.
But if that's so, I don't see how the different strains can be created in the first place.
Well, among the many thousands of offspring, there may be just a few that react to Portuguese.
You're talking about mutations.
Correct. Playing the tapes helps to identify the mutant strains. Those specimens are then isolated and bred with one another. From their children, specimens that react more strongly to Portuguese can again be selected and bred. Repeating this process creates a strain that reacts solely to Portuguese and never to Spanish. Mutation and selection. No different to breeding roses.
So you kept increasing the change over the generations, adapting them to languages from all over the world. Must have taken a hell of a lot of patience.
More like patience. Just how many died for this?
There's something I still don't get. In order to tell which larvae will react to Portuguese, you'd have to let them develop and then see which copulate. That means you'd need tens of thousands of guinea pigs. There's no way you could do that in a facility that small.
For normal selective breeding methods, you would be right. But there is a more effective selection method when training the vocal cord parasites.
Go on.
It is not only when mating that the parasites listen for language. Shortly before hatching, larvae display markedly increased activity in reaction to particular language. The active eggs can be identified under a black light. So the eggs that react to Portuguese are selectively placed in the throats of subjects. So you see, narrowing down strains that react to the target language is an effective process. Though I'm sure that even so, many lost their lives to create the various strains.
Taken again.
against their will into that dungeon?
There are two reasons for playing the tapes for the parasites. One, to isolate the eggs that respond to the target language. And two, to cause the specimens raised from the selected eggs to mate.
I get how the system works. But why do they respond to language before they even hatch? It's not like they can mate from inside an egg.
It is because the larvae learn the language before hatching.
You mentioned that what language the parasites respond to is hard-coded into their genes, and that they don't have the brain power to actually learn a language. But then you say that the larvae at Nzoya Badia Bulu were learning the languages in the egg. Your story doesn't add up.
Your country is home to a unique songbird. The Japanese bush warbler.
Sure, what of it?
What a beautiful call it has. But no bush warbler can sing it perfectly at the start. As chicks, they can barely chirp at all. They must learn from their parents and other adult birds. Only then can they sing properly and attract females. So naturally, there are individual differences in each bird's call. Though they start on the same footing, each bird is influenced by its teachers.
And the parasites are the same?
Like the birds, the parasites have a genetic predisposition towards a particular language. But while in the egg, the larvae's ears are tweaked by listening to the voice of the host. This tweaking ensures that the grown parasites will react better to the host's speech pattern.
Why would they have an ability like that?
Well, there are distinct regional differences within even the same language. Rare is the language that has no unique dialects. Yes, learning the host's speech pattern before hatching attunes the larvae to whatever twist of pronunciation it will encounter. This adaptive ability is what makes them so formidable.
I see. So a language requires selective breeding, but the parasites can learn dialects by themselves.
Of course, having the egg-stage larvae listen to the tapes in the factory was not meant to teach them. It was more important to use that trait of theirs to identify the mutated strains. As I mentioned earlier.
Is that really accurate enough to use as a weapon? You could wipe out a neighboring ethnic group by accident if their pronunciation is too close.
What you say is true. In that sense, they are imperfect as ethnic cleansers. But for his purposes, they are good enough. His objective was not to exterminate any one ethnic group, but to render the world's lingua franca, English, inert.
There's something I've been wondering. Why are you called Code Talker? During World War II, the U.S. military used the languages of different tribes, including the Navajo, as codes, right? I know the term Code Talker was used to mean people sent to the battlefield to speak in those codes. Were you one of them?
Our mother tongue was indeed used for war. But I did not go. I was already over the conscription age. However, I was made to help craft the codes that were spoken. So in a wider sense, you could call me a code talker for that. Navajo is a complex language, and virtually no one outside the U.S. speaks it. They must have thought it was the perfect language to use as a code.
Yeah, in the end, the Japanese never cracked it. The cipher is king in information warfare.
Of course, they didn't simply speak in Navajo. They created substitutions for words according to a code book, and then translated those into our language. Young Diné, sent to the front lines of the Pacific Theater as code talkers. To fight is an honor for the Diné. They were the pride of our people. But I cannot say this history brings me joy. Words are alive. When they are spoken, life is breathed into them. They become a part of the listener. Our words were transformed into lifeless ciphers and used for war. This, after the Black Ana spent generations suppressing the language.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess we shouldn't be calling you Code Talker, huh?
No, I do not mind. The reason Skullface called me Code Talker was because I also am responsible for coding language into the vocal cord parasites. I am the same as those young warriors, used for a cipher's sake. I must never forget that. The name, Code Talker, is a lesson carved into my being.
You said Skullface ordered you to weaponize the vocal cord parasites. But you also said he wasn't the reason.
And he wasn't. I was seduced by the parasites. That is a fact.
How? You mean from your curiosity as a scientist?
That I cannot deny. But there is more to it. The story goes back to the 19th century, to my earliest memory. One day, a man from the government visited our Hogan, our home. I cried as he yanked me from my mother's arms and took me away to an Indian boarding school. From that day forward, I became George. This was the name my teacher gave me. I was forced to give up my Diné name, forbidden from speaking anything but English. If we dared utter a word of filthy Navajo, the teacher made us eat a bar of soap.
Yeah, that was the U.S. government's education policy for Native Americans.
To erase our words was like erasing our people. Their education was tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Over time, the overt persecution of our language stopped. But to this day, it continues to be eaten away by the lingua franca, that is English. Many of the Diné outside the reservations can speak nothing else